I'm Professor John Schwandt, and this is the final video in my short three-part series on how to accent Biblical and Ancient Greek. This is the easiest of the three videos, and if you haven't seen the first two, general accenting and how to accent nonverbs, please watch those first because this one won't make much sense without those. This video deals with how to accent verbs. The general principle for accenting verbs is recession. The accent wants to get as early as possible. This is good news because you don't have to memorize the accent location for each verb as a vocabulary word like you do with non-verbs. Every time you see a verb, you should be able to figure out exactly where it needs to be accented by this principle of recession. I'm going to use the same sentence I've used in the previous videos as our example, and I'm going to use an indicative form of the participle legon up there as our example word. And notice I have some islands, our three last syllables represented as islands down below. So let's take a look at lego as an indicative verb. Notice in the singular forms, lego, legis, legi, the ultimas are all long, and that's how I have it represented with the islands. Notice the final island is a long island here. Now with a long ultima, our earliest accent is acute on the penult. In fact, following our principle of recession for verbs, we aren't going to see circumflexes very often in verbs because acute can beat that circumflex every time. It can be on the antepenult with a short ultima and on the penult with a long ultima, as we see here. So in the singulars, we have the acute on the penult, lego, legis, legi. Notice in the plurals, the ultimas change to short syllables. This means the acute can move all the way out to the antepenult. And that's what we have in legomen, legete, legusi. Now, it just so happens in verbs, when we change the ultima to a short ending, we generally include another syllable. The ending ends up having two syllables, an additional syllable. So we end up accenting the same root syllable. So it's still accented on the leg because even though we have two syllables in our stem and ending, the final syllable is now short, and we're able to jump all the way back out to the root. Legomen, legete, legusi. But again, our general principle is simply recession. We look at the ultima. If it's short, we go all the way out to the antepenult with the acute. If it's long, we go to the penult with the acute. It just so happens in the present indicative, there's only one form where we don't get to accent it on the root, and that is the passive first person plural form, legomatha. The stem and ending has three syllables itself, and so we're not able to get back to the root for that particular form. There is a situation where circumflex will appear on a verb, and let's check that out with ero here. It means I lift. Notice that it's first person singular. It has the long ultima, so our island there is long. And given a long ultima, we have to accent it with an acute on the penult, just as we have accented here. The other mark is a smooth breather. Well, I can talk about those in a different video. Right now, we're just talking about accenting. Now, if I make that ending short, like in the imperative ere, I want to accent it on the antepenult. Unfortunately, this word doesn't have that many syllables. So I got to come back to the penult. And in this situation, I have an option. Both the acute and the circumflex are eligible for the penult. But if in these situations, if you must accent the penult and circumflex is available, so I call this a short-long situation. The ultima is short, the penult's long, and we are going to accent it because we've run out of syllables. Then you must use circumflex. I mean, it's his only opportunity to show himself out that far. And so if he can play there, send him in the game. You got to use him. Now, if we put a prepositional prefix on this verb, ep, again, just lift up, now we have our three syllables, and so we can accent with an acute on the antepenult. Again, we're simply following our principle of recession for verbs. We're trying to accent as early as possible. Now let's look at the last verb in our sentence, peripatein. That verb is a contract verb. Its root ends in an epsilon, actually. If you looked it up in the lexicon, it would be peripateo. And here, the uncontracted form would be peripatein. We want to accent on a penult. We can get there with an acute given the long ultima. But then our short vowels, our epsilon in this case, or alpha or omicron in other cases, when they're placed next to other vowels, they'll contract. And so our accented syllable gets absorbed. And when that happens to an accented syllable, you mark that absorption with a circumflex. And so you're going to see a number of verbs with these circumflexes on their ultima, like the word for thank you, eferisto. And anytime you come across a verb like that, it's a contract verb, and it's just marking that there was an acute, usually on the penult, that was absorbed by the ending, and it was originally 2 syllables, and we're just marking that with a circumflex. That's it for the basic rules of accenting. Please check out my Facebook page for other videos. I plan to release another one on how to accent words when they're followed by an enclitic. And that's the last thing that can kind of mess with our accenting. And I would like to post a video defending the use of accents, why this is important to learn when you're learning Greek. So that information, as well as other neat tools like a Greek keyboard and other things that I'm producing, you can find there at facebook.com/IBG page. Also, feel free to add a comment to this video as well as the others and tell your friends about it. Hopefully it's helpful and answer some of your questions about accenting ancient and biblical Greek. Thanks for watching.